There's a unique geography of sound out in the Nevada desert. It's defined by these vast empty distances and a stillness. Well, often it feels less like quiet, more like a physical pressure, something actually pressing down on your eardrums. It's this kind of atmospheric void where time and maybe reason too can just get easily misplaced. That deep, isolating silence. That's the setting for the account we're tracing today. Okay, so the genesis of this whole mystery. It dates back years. It started with maybe the most cryptic of digital sources. A defunct online comment thread, basically lost now. An anonymous hiker mentioned finding this distinctive formation somewhere north of Las Vegas, a cave, shaped like the letter M. But the detail that really stuck, the thing that pulled someone else back years later, it was the hiker's claim that as they got close, their whole body began to vibrate. And not like a vibration from fear or, anticipation. No, this was described as an unidentifiable physical frequency, like a pressure, something that told him just instinctively, turn back right now. He didn't leave any coordinates, nothing like that. Just that one very disquieting experience. So fast forward, the narrator of our main source material, years later, they decided the story was probably just a hoax, a piece of internet lore, kind of ripe for debunking. So they made their decision, packed their gear, and they detailed their plan. Parked near an old forgotten mining road, maybe, 40 miles north of the chaos of Vegas, they brought the essential tools for documentation, water, of course, a video camera, GPS offline maps. They set out specifically, really, to prove that this particular corner of the huge desert was, in fact, empty of any, supernatural. Right, what exactly did they find? Hiking for just relentless hours. You have to picture the scale here. The desert it's endless. Just this flat, monochromatic beige canvas, punctuated only by the occasional dark, shimmering ridgeline way off in the distance that never seems to get any closer as time stretches out there. And the lack of reference points can be really disorienting. It wasn't until late in the afternoon, almost against all odds, that they actually located the anomaly. Now, the physical description of the entrance, this is perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence we have. It was a narrow opening, curved precisely, and unnervingly, like a crooked M. They immediately observed that this did not look like any natural cave formation. The edges were, quote, too smooth, too precise. It looked manufactured, it looked intentional, and that just defied any standard geological explanation. Crouched down near the mouth of the cave, turned on their flashlight, standing right there at the threshold of this M-shaped darkness. And that is exactly when the phenomenon began. What's really fascinating here is that the primary effect, it wasn't auditory, it wasn't a growl or a whistle or anything you could hear. The narrator described it as a low hum, but insisted the experience was felt entirely as pure physical pressure, centered specifically in the chest, vibrating right through the diaphragm. They actually drew an analogy, like standing next to a giant subwoofer you can't hear, only feel. First, the narrator noted that the cave was otherwise completely silent, just silent. There were no sounds of machinery nearby, no obvious wind turbulence right at the entrance, no underground water flow they could hear to generate that pressure. And second, this unsettling detail, the flashlight, just a simple electronic device. It flickered once. Now, this suggests the presence of some kind of localized non-acoustic energy, something powerful enough to maybe disturb an electrical current. That's something far beyond just a simple pressure wave coming from some distant source. The response, it was immediate. We backed away instantly, driven by this overriding instinctual feeling that just screamed, do not go in. They obeyed that feeling, chose self-preservation over investigation, hiked back to their vehicle. That strange, chest-rattling pressure only faded once they were many yards away. Okay, so upon returning home, we uploaded a short clip and a description, put it on a hiking forum. And the reaction was, explosive. Within hours, their inbox just blew up completely. The public reaction immediately crystallized a central debate around this thing. Was this a genuine sighting of some kind of restricted military tunnel, maybe an antenna or sensor array generating low-frequency signals? That was one theory. Or far more ominously, were the commenters correct when they simply declared that the narrator had found the entrance, whatever that meant? They tried to ignore all the internet chaos. They knew the desert. They were looking for logic. But as we all know, curiosity, it's a powerful force, especially when it's coupled with that need to maybe prove a point or disprove one. So 2 weeks later, we went back. We intended to document the site thoroughly this time, capture enough footage to finally debunk all the fears for the skeptical online masses, settle it. And this brings us to the chilling final chapter, the last known moment we have of the narrator. It's preserved on their camera's memory card. It's just a short piece of footage. It shows them standing confidently at the trailhead, grinning right into the lens. They look optimistic, ready to finish what they started. Their final recorded words are simple and clear, they say. Round 2. Let's see if I can find the M cave again. And that was the end of the footage. 3 days later, search and rescue teams located the car. It was parked precisely where the narrator had left it, near that old mining road. What the teams found, or maybe, more accurately, what they didn't find, offers some crucial insights into the nature of this disappearance. Crucially, the vehicle was completely untroubled, no forced entry, no signs of any disturbance at all. And here is a detail that, well, it speaks volumes: the keys. They were still in the ignition. Now, if we analyze just this single piece of evidence, the keys in the ignition, it suggests an immediate departure, rapid, and entirely unexpected. A person who plans to leave their vehicle for hours or days, they secure it, right? You lock it, you take the keys. Leaving the keys like that suggests either found panic or maybe an assumption that they would be back in just seconds. And the fact that the car was untouched suggests the departure wasn't forced. It was instantaneous. Missing, along with the narrator, were 2 key items: the camera, obviously, which contained all the evidence from both trips, and their hiking bag. Now, the bag's absence could imply 2 scenarios. Either the narrator took it because they planned to hike for the long duration needed to reach the cave again, or, maybe more sinisterly, whatever took the narrator also ensured the means of survival and documentation went with them. Search and rescue spent weeks combing that expansive, featureless desert. They used specialized equipment, they covered vast distances, and they found absolutely nothing. The official records are sparse. They just detail this clinical vacuum of findings, quote, no tracks, no signs of struggle, nothing. Just an empty desert swallowing everything whole. The disappearance was. Well, perfect. To this day, the legend persists. The Stanley Hotel. Now, Evan's arrival at the Stanley wasn't planned, not at all. It was really an act of desperation. He was driving through the high passes in Colorado, after a long hiking trip. And everything, it seemed, was conspiring against him. His phone battery was almost dead. He was exhausted. Maybe most urgent, a storm was rolling down the mountainside, really aggressively, threatening to white out the roads completely. He looked for motels, anything accessible, but critically, everything was fully booked. So isolation, exhaustion, necessity. They forced his hand. It was getting dark, really dusky when he saw it. The sign. Vacancy, the Stanley Hotel. He knew the name, of course. Who wouldn't? The hotel that inspired Stephen King's The Shining. It's the kind of place you might book deliberately, for the spooky factor. For a photo, maybe. Not usually for refuge from a storm. But, well, when the alternative is sleeping in your car during a blizzard, your logic shifts, doesn't it? Evan rationalized it. He told himself, sort of deliberately convincing himself, it's just a story. By the time he actually pulled into the parking lot, the fog wasn't just low anymore. It had completely swallowed the mountain peaks. Gone. The building itself looked majestic, sure, glowing white against all that swirling mist, grand, stately. But there was something else, a disturbing quality. It was, as he noted, almost too still, like it was holding its breath. The second he stepped inside, the sensory details hit him immediately. The interior smelled of polished wood, that deep, historical scent. But it was mixed with something else. Faint but heavy. Old perfume. A beautiful smell, maybe, but strangely overwhelming. And right here is where the journey stops being just about desperate necessity. It starts feeling more like an appointment with fate. He goes to check in. There's a young woman at the front desk. She smiles politely. Maybe, he thought, a little too politely. And she slides the key card across the counter. She tells him, "You're in room 217. Evan froze. Just stopped. Now, you might already know this detail, but the sheer weight of that room number is enormous. It wasn't just any supposedly haunted room. It was the exact room. The one where Stephen King stayed back in the mid-70s. The room that acted like a lightning rod. The one that channeled the whole story of the Overlook Hotel. So Evan tries to inject some normalcy, some human levity into this increasingly strange situation. He attempted a joke, picked up the card, forced a smile, and he said, "Perfect. Hope it's haunted." The clerk. She didn't smile back. Didn't even twitch, didn't react at all. She just held that polite, quiet, unsettling silence. The tension, he said, was immediate, visceral. The journey to the room itself was this long, slow walk down an utterly empty hallway. His footsteps echoed, which felt wrong because the carpet was thick. They shouldn't have echoed like that. It was as if sound itself was behaving strangely in that building. When he finally got to 217 and opened the door, the air inside felt different. He described it as, quote, charged, like a quiet that didn't just absorb sound but seemed to actively press against his ears, if that makes sense. He tried to ground himself, routine things, turn on the TV, unpacked his small backpack. But then, around midnight, the shift came. The power flickered once, a sharp, momentary loss of light. Then it flickered again, longer this time, and then it went out completely. Total darkness. Silence. Blackness. He managed to grab his phone, turned on its small, frankly inadequate flashlight. The air in the room had changed too. The storm was raging outside, sure, but inside the room smelled of ozone. You know that electric smell right before lightning strikes? That. Mixed with something else, though, something faintly sweet. He described it as, like flowers gone bad. Whew. Then came the sound, soft, distinct, impossible to rationalize away. A single click. And right after the click, the slow, gradual, utterly terrifying creak of the bathroom door, just easing itself open into the darkened room, all by itself. His heart, he said, instantly started pounding against his ribs. He could actually hear it, even over the growing intensity of the storm outside. He shone the thin beam of his phone light over toward the bathroom, and the light revealed the shower curtain. It was swaying slightly, gently. He said it looked as if someone had just brushed past it, maybe stepping out of the bath, he called out. His voice sounded thin, lost in that immense darkness. "Hello?" Nothing, no reply. The silence was absolute, complete. But then came the single most crucial, most chilling audio detail in this entire account. Faintly, very faintly, coming from the direction of the bathroom, he heard a woman humming. And the quality of that hum, the emotional tone of it, that's what really sets this story apart. It wasn't, a mournful wail or a malicious shriek, nothing obviously ghostly like that. He described it as absolutely casual, like someone just going through their nightly motions, getting ready for bed. That mundane, domestic, utterly non-threatening presence, just completing a routine. While standing where absolutely no one should be. That was far more terrifying, he felt, than any loud, violent specter could ever have been. Evan bolted, didn't think twice. Grabbed his keys, his phone, and just rushed downstairs. He found the night clerk at the front desk. And the night clerk's reaction was, well, it was profound in its lack of reaction. He wasn't surprised, not in the least. Didn't ask what was wrong. He just looked up at Evan, who was obviously shaking, clearly distressed, and asked one simple, confirming question. Room 217. And that's when the story gets its historical footing, its confirmation. Evan nodded, breathless, and the clerk just sighed. Stated simply, almost with a kind of resigned affection, she likes that room. The clerk then provided the identity of this presence. Elizabeth Wilson. She was the old head housekeeper at the Stanley. Way back in 1911, her story is absolutely crucial here. She was involved in a massive gas explosion, one that happened right there in room 217. But and this is the key point. She survived the explosion. She didn't actually die there. She recovered and continued working at the hotel for many, many years after that. Driven, by all accounts, by this powerful sense of duty, tidiness, order. In this history, it explains the very specific, almost gentle nature of the reported haunting. The activity associated with Elizabeth Wilson is consistently domestic, tidy, benign almost. They're like residual echoes of a job that maybe feels unfinished to her. Guests report lights turning on by themselves, luggage being unpacked, neatly placed into drawers, and the most notorious detail, the one everyone talks about, waking up in the middle of the night to find that their blankets have been pulled up snugly around them, that they've literally been tucked into bed. It seems to be a haunting driven by this residual need to fulfill a job requirement, to ensure the guests are comfortable, that the room is immaculate. Evan, still trying to grasp onto any shred of rational scientific certainty, asked the clerk, couldn't there be a reasonable explanation? Old pipes settling, just the wind whistling through cracks, old wiring, maybe intensified by the storm. The clerk's response was, for me, maybe the most unnerving line in the entire account. Simple, polite, and just profoundly dismissive of skepticism. He just said, "You're welcome to think that." Evan did not go back to the room to sleep. Absolutely not. He spent the rest of the night shivering in his car, waiting for dawn. But the story has one final unsettling piece of evidence. The next morning, after the storm had passed, he went back up to the room just quickly to grab his belongings. The power was back on. Everything looked normal. And the room was, maybe predictably, spotless. Perfect. The bed was neatly made. The curtains were drawn just so, and there it was, on the pillow. Where he knew he had crumpled his head in exhaustion the night before, there was a faint imprint, like someone had just been lying there, waiting.